Hi, I'm Joe Carrero. As a matter of fact, I'm an average Joe who became a stockbroker, learning all the advantages of being in big business, and then became a small businessman who learned about all the dangers of having the personal responsibility of success or failure without any of the benefits of those corporations with limited risks and so many friends providing them unlimited protections. And along the way, I taught graduate school and became a state senator for 20 years and was an advocate for all those small businesses who provide most of the jobs in our country without the benefits of having friends in high places. So as a businessman, I understood and understand the needs of business. But let's see if I can explain how I could possibly be business friendly and still oppose tax breaks, loopholes, and the lowering of corporate tax rates. I should start by saying that I'm more concerned with the welfare of our country than I am with these spins being put forth by many corporations whose existence is based upon making a profit, with their executives having a fiduciary duty to maximize profit for their shareholders. I guess if we use the word greed in a positive sense, that would explain their financial purpose. And trust me, I understand without that profit motive, our country would not have evolved to being the greatest economic entity in the world. My goal now is to support efforts to keep it that way. But our country has difficulty when that profit motive overextends itself because of excess greed, rather than just guaranteeing a fair return on investment. And all it takes is a little creativity and a willing, conspiring Congress, and you have a contributing factor to our deficit that wasn't around years ago when everybody played by rules established for the well-being of our country as well as business. And business profit has been good for our country, especially in the good old days when it was simply defined as the excess of income over expenditures. And since taxes are expenditures, one way to maximize profit is to minimize taxes. But some have been allowed to take that to a whole new level. That's why a corporation like GE that pays no taxes looks upon its tax department and its over 1,000 tax employees as a profit center. They're paying 1,000 people a lot of money to go over every possibility for potential tax savings so that they don't have to pay the government anything and thus make more money. Of course, as a small businessman, I always thought that spending my time and money on a business and employees that increased my product quality and quantity as good business, rather than spending that time, money, and effort figuring out ways not to pay the government anything. Not that I particularly enjoyed paying the government, but I didn't mind paying something to help it pay for stuff like defense, education, social programs that help those less fortunate, and anything else it does, as well as having the privilege of being able to create a livelihood in the United States of America. Of course, GE stands out not only because it doesn't pay any taxes, or that it also doesn't create any jobs because of those tax savings, but because its CEO who makes these decisions is the job czar in the Obama administration. But many major corporations avoid paying taxes. Some of our nation's most profitable companies pay a tax rate of 0 or less meaning getting money from the government. And 30 of these companies had a negative income tax rate, even though they took home a combined $160 billion in pre-tax profits. And the financial services industry netted the largest share of $223 billion in total tax subsidies that these companies received. Wells Fargo, for example, received the most tax subsidies with over $18 billion in tax breaks over the last 3 years, as they considered adding a fee to their customers to take more money out of the hands of consumers who need to spend money to bring the government more revenue so they can pay these subsidies to these corporations so they make more profit. Amazing. Of course, the argument we hear is that the United States is the second highest corporate tax rate in the world at 35%, and that a lower tax rate could help bring jobs back to our country through a manufacturing revival in America. But we know that these corporations already have trillions sitting on the sidelines waiting for a time to invest. So cutting their taxes won't create more jobs, but rather just add to the monies they are waiting to invest, or pay out in bonuses to corporate executives who fought hard to get those tax breaks. Of course, profits are up anyway because corporations became more efficient thanks in part to technology that has allowed them to trim their workforces by firing or laying off workers. And the reason they haven't invested in expansion is because they're waiting for demand to increase. And if we cut their taxes, they still won't hire or invest until demand increases. But with unemployment so high, in part because of the cutting of their business workforces and consumer confidence being so low, there won't be any increase in consumer demand anytime soon. But believe me, those executives will keep telling you that lowering that corporate tax rate is the silver bullet to get our economy up again, because they know their shareholders will reward them personally for increasing their profit by lowering the tax rate. And now we have presidential candidates tripping over each other, trying to get the corporate tax lowered to 20% and 9% and even 0. Even though they just lowered the consumer's tax rate, if they just did that, they would create the demand required, require an expansion of business and the hiring of more people. But us consumers don't run the government. Corporations do. Of course, some of these corporations will never be satisfied. You'd think they'd have enough benefit from all the loopholes to avoid paying taxes provided them from Congress, like that incredible active financing exception first passed in 1997 that allows corporations to avoid paying U.S. taxes on overseas profits if those profits were derived by actively financing some activity or deal. How many members of Congress do you think even understands what that means? And the active financing exception was never supposed to be a permanent part of the tax code. But every couple of years, lobbyists descend on Congress with their pockets full of campaign cash to explain its necessity, and it temporarily then gets put back in the tax code. It works out pretty good for all the parties concerned, with corporations continuing another nice tax break, with lobbyists getting paid to influence lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and those in Congress getting an infusion of campaign cash every couple of years. Oh, the taxpayers don't make out quite as good, since it costs the government over $5 billion a year. This loophole, by the way, was created with the genius of those tax experts working for GE years ago, and has caused that company to shift billions in profits from its U.S. income statement to overseas income statements. So as it appears, as Congress is trying to solve its deficit on the one hand, it's working hand in hand with corporations like GE to help solve their problem of having to pay taxes. It's unbelievable. And now we have such mega successful companies and corporations as Apple and Google lobbying Congress to pass an additional tax loophole known as the repatriation tax holiday, that you might also have heard presidential candidates talking about, that would allow corporations to avoid taxes on over $1 trillion in offshore profits. In exchange, the companies argued they would then invest these dollars in the United States. Oh, really? Come on. These corporations use these false claims all the time to get all these groups and Republicans worked up about using tax breaks, tax holidays, and loopholes to create jobs by giving the corporate world all kinds of advantages that small businessmen don't have the time to even think about. Fortunately, many conservative groups have stopped falling for the blanket statement that if it's good for business, it must be good for America, as history repeats itself with a similar request made to a pro-business administration and a willing Congress that passed in 2004. That did little to boost employment growth. In fact, some of the biggest companies taking advantage of that law actually cut jobs. Dow Chemical, Verizon, and Bank of America were some of the companies that actually slashed jobs after benefiting from that repatriation tax holiday. Oh, and do you think your elected officials learned anything when they offered that repatriation tax holiday that Bank of America took advantage of in 2004, or the $25 billion bailout that Bank of America got in 2008, or the $20 billion bailout they also got in 2009, as our government was guaranteeing $118 billion of their assets that they were holding? And after this banking corporation conglomerate holding company received all this largesse from our government, they decided to take more money out of the economy by raising fees on the accounts of its customers. And now, to add even more insult to industry, they have announced plans to lay off 40,000 workers. The economy gets a little bit back, however, when their customers just got awarded hundreds of millions of dollars because Bank of America was ripping them off on overdraft fees. Folks, wake up. You're being taken for a ride by those who don't have a concern for your interests or our country's interests. And what about the small businesses? Who's looking after them? Do you think they get a break when they walk into the Bank of America looking for a way to expand their business so they can hire more workers? No. They're told the bank doesn't have any money left for them. This is why our economy is such a mess. And it's because those people you elected to office are either in collusion with these people ripping off our country, or they're not smart enough to figure out what's going on. So please, be careful who you vote for. And next time, do business with a small business who's not asking for a handout. And thanks for listening to An Average Joe.